the day she walked away. She slammed the door on the millionaire who betrayed her. 3 years later, he met the children he never knew existed. Evelyn Clark didn't remember how she got from the restaurant to Caleb Kingston's penthouse. Her heart hammered so violently, she felt it might collapse her ribs from the inside. Her hands trembled, still clenched from what she had just seen. Caleb, sitting at a candlelit table, across from a stunning brunette, laughing in the same easy way he used to laugh with Evelyn. He hadn't noticed her standing across the street. Or maybe he had, and he chose not to react. That hurt more than the image itself. It wasn't the woman that shattered her. It was the familiarity, the comfort, the timing. Evelyn had just found the courage to tell him about the baby. Their baby. She had rehearsed the moment in her head all day, imagined every version of how it might go. She never imagined she'd see him with someone else first. By the time she reached the apartment they once shared, all that was left of her calm was rage held together by grief. Caleb opened the door with a relaxed smile, still in his pristine shirt and blazer, expecting nothing unusual. His expression changed the moment he saw her face. "I saw you with her," Evelyn said, her voice cold, quiet, final. Caleb blinked, stunned. "Wait, Evelyn, it's not what you think." But she was already backing away, one hand protective over her stomach, the other gripping the door. He reached out a hand, but she slammed the door shut before he could say another word. The echo of the lock between them was louder than anything they could have said. In that moment, something inside her broke, but something else hardened. Evelyn had always been forgiving, always soft, always understanding. But this was a line she could not ignore. She had trusted Caleb Kingston, the golden boy of the tech world, the charming CEO with ice-blue eyes and an ambition bigger than any skyscraper. She had believed he saw her not just as temporary, but as real. She had been wrong. That night, Evelyn didn't cry. Instead, she packed a suitcase with trembling hands, left her keys on the counter, and walked out into the city, with only a child growing inside her and a future she would have to build alone. It was pouring rain. She didn't run from the rain. She let it soak her completely. By morning, she was on a train heading north, away from the city, the cameras, Caleb's multi-million-dollar empire. She found a small town, 3 hours away. Quiet, slow, safe. She rented a modest house with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn. The landlord didn't ask too many questions. That was good, because she didn't have many answers. Her pregnancy passed with solitude as her closest companion. There were doctor's visits she attended alone, sonograms she watched with bittersweet awe, and baby books she read in the middle of the night, because sleep didn't come easily. The image of Caleb with another woman never left her. Every time she tried to rationalize it, to tell herself maybe he truly was innocent, the ache grew stronger. She didn't want explanations anymore. She wanted peace. When the twins were born, 2 perfect little boys with light brown hair and crystal clear blue eyes, she named them Leo and Finn. She gave them both her last name. No middle names, no trace of the man who had vanished from their lives before they ever took a breath. They were hers entirely, and yet, no matter how far she ran, Caleb Kingston was a man whispered about by the world. He was everywhere, in headlines, in commercials, in interviews talking about innovation and vision, never once mentioning the woman he had left behind, or the children he didn't know he had. Evelyn silenced every mention of him. She stopped looking at magazines. She stopped watching tech news. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered if he ever felt like something was missing, that somewhere, 2 little boys who looked just like him were learning to laugh, to walk, to live. Without him. She told herself she didn't need him, and most days she believed it. But the truth, buried under all the layers of strength and silence, was that a part of her still remembered who he had been before the lie, before the betrayal. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted enough to carry a future inside her. But that man was gone, and she had to become strong enough not to look back. Would you have left without an explanation like Evelyn? Do you think she made the right choice in protecting herself, or should she have given Caleb a chance to explain? A different kind of life. Life in the quiet coastal town of Harbor Cove moved at half the pace of the city. But for Evelyn, it was exactly what she needed. The salty air, the rhythm of the tides, and the lack of questions gave her something she hadn't felt in months. Control. She knew no one when she arrived, and that anonymity became her shield. She rented a small, weather-beaten cottage on the edge of town, close enough to the market, but far enough from the neighbors. The walls were thin, the heater unreliable, and the roof creaked with every storm. But it was hers, a place to disappear, to heal, and to prepare for what was coming. Her pregnancy proceeded in a haze of quiet resilience. Evelyn never imagined she would face it alone, but as the days bled into weeks, she adapted. She learned to handle the fatigue while working from home, balancing freelance design projects with prenatal vitamins and endless reading. She researched everything obsessively: natural childbirths, baby sleep patterns, feeding schedules, because planning gave her something to hold on to. She didn't have Caleb, but she had knowledge, and that made her feel less scared. The first time she heard 2 heartbeats during a sonogram, she wept. Not because she was afraid, but because in that moment, the loneliness gave way to something else entirely: awe. There were 2 of them, 2 tiny lives. She hadn't expected twins, and the idea of raising 2 children without support was overwhelming. But she also felt a kind of electric joy. It meant she wouldn't be alone. Not really. As her belly grew, she began to talk to them. At night, she would lie on her old couch and whisper to the little ones she hadn't met yet. She told them stories from her childhood about her love for art, music, and the stars. She never mentioned their father. Not once. She convinced herself they didn't need to know, that their world would be complete even without a missing piece. When the labor came, it was long and brutal. Evelyn had no one in the waiting room, no one to pace the halls with worry, no one to hold her hand when the pain twisted through her body like lightning. But she got through it with every ounce of strength she had saved in her soul. When Leo arrived, he let out a sharp, defiant cry that echoed through the room. Moments later, Finn arrived in silence, his tiny chest rising and falling with the calm of someone older than his minutes. The nurses smiled and called them miracle boys. Evelyn held them both in her arms, skin to skin, and in that moment she knew her life would never belong to just her again. The first few months blurred into one another. Sleepless nights, 3 a.m. feedings, lullabies sung through yawns and tears. Leo was restless, always kicking, curious, impossible to keep still. Finn was gentle and slow to cry, always watching his brother with big, thoughtful eyes. Evelyn kept a journal where she wrote everything down: the milestones, the fears, the funny things they did. It became her way of recording a story only she was witnessing. But there were hard days, too. Days when both boys were sick, and she had to race between their cribs, a thermometer in one hand and a cold compress in the other. There were moments she stared at her phone, tempted to look him up, to see his face, if only for a second. But she never allowed herself to type his name. The temptation to reach out was always crushed by the memory of that night. of how quickly he had smiled at someone else, of how quickly he had become a stranger. And yet, Caleb's absence was everywhere. In the questions the pediatrician asked about family history, in the blank space on the birth certificate, in the fact that she alone had to decide everything about their future. Still, she carried it. For them, over time, the town became familiar. The woman at the bakery always saved Evelyn an extra cinnamon roll on Fridays. The old man who ran the hardware store gave her a used space heater when he found out she had twins. She wasn't close to anyone, but she was no longer invisible. She became the brave young mom with the beautiful boys. No one asked about their father. No one needed to. They all assumed what she allowed them to assume. When the boys turned 2, she threw a small party in the backyard. Just balloons, cupcakes she baked herself, and a playlist of soft acoustic songs they loved to dance to. Leo ran in circles chasing bubbles. Finn tried to stack plastic blocks on a folding chair. Evelyn watched them, kneeling in the grass, and realized something simple and devastating. They were enough, and yet a part of her still carried the story she had buried, the love she once had, the betrayal she never got to resolve, and the truth she had never dared to tell. Because no matter how much she tried to erase Caleb from her life, she couldn't erase him from their faces. Every time Leo raised an eyebrow just like him, or Finn squinted when he was concentrating, she felt the echo of a man who had no idea what he had left behind. But she never said a word. Not yet. She never could. Because her sons deserved a life without ghosts. And she had finally built one. Is it fair for Evelyn to keep the truth from her sons? What do you think would have been the most difficult part of raising the twins alone for her? The unavoidable collision. By the time Leo and Finn turned 3, Evelyn had developed a rhythm that, while exhausting, made her feel powerful in a way she had never known. Her days started before the sun and ended long after the boys had fallen asleep. Every morning, she made them oatmeal with banana slices. She combed their soft brown hair and listened to their small voices argue about what color socks to wear. It was chaotic and tender, and every detail mattered. She had become the kind of mother she never thought she'd have to be, present for every single second. Even when her body craved rest and her mind swirled with worries she couldn't say out loud, Leo had become a whirlwind of energy, always leaping from one activity to the next, shouting questions, pointing out the obvious as if he were discovering it for the first time. He loved trucks, dogs, and music, and would belt out songs at the top of his lungs, even if he didn't know the words. Finn, in contrast, was quiet and observant, often opting to watch his brother from a distance before joining in. He was gentle with animals and people alike, with a thoughtful gaze that made Evelyn wonder what he was thinking. She often said they were night and day, yet they were both born from the same storm of love and hurt. She couldn't imagine one without the other. Their bond was unbreakable. Even when they fought, they made up in minutes. If Leo scraped his knee, Finn would run to get a Band-Aid. If Finn couldn't reach a toy, Leo would drag a chair across the room without being asked. Sometimes they spoke their own language, half words, half glances, and Evelyn often felt she was watching a small universe that had formed between them, one she was now privileged to orbit. Work was constant, but never easy. Evelyn took on freelance projects at night while the boys slept, designing logos and websites for small businesses and local artists. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, put food on the table, and allowed her to stay home with the twins during the day. She sacrificed everything for that freedom: sleep, comfort, a social life. But it was worth it. They were worth it. Still, even in the quiet security of the life she had built, there were moments of piercing uncertainty. Sometimes, when the boys were playing outside, Evelyn would sit on the porch and stare down the street, half expecting a black SUV or a familiar figure to appear. She would shake the thought away. Caleb didn't know where she was, and even if he did, he hadn't come looking. That was the truth she clung to. He had made his decision. She had made hers. Then, the photo happened. It was a warm spring morning at the town market. Evelyn had taken the boys to pick out strawberries and sunflowers, something they did every Saturday. A local photographer was documenting moms in their natural habitat, taking candid shots of families as part of a feel-good blog project. Evelyn didn't think much of it when he asked to take a few pictures. She politely agreed, took Leo's hand in one and Finn's in the other, and laughed as they tugged her toward a giant pile of fresh bread. The photographer thanked her and handed her a business card, promising to tag her if the photos were used. She forgot about it almost immediately, but a week later, her face was everywhere. The blog post had gone viral. Single mom of twins steals hearts at Harbor Cove Market. Comments poured in with praise, questions, speculation. People wanted to know who she was, where she came from, how she managed it all alone. Someone reposted it on Twitter, then Instagram, then on national parenting forums. Evelyn tried to ignore it. She told herself it would blow over. But the photo, her laughing in the sunlight with two boys who mirrored Caleb's eyes, was now floating across the internet like a flare. She didn't sleep for 3 nights after it happened. The possibility of being found, of her past catching up with her, ate away at every corner of her mind. She checked her email compulsively, then hated herself for doing it. On the 4th day, it happened. She opened her inbox and froze. A new message. No subject. Sender, Caleb Kingston. She stared at it for almost 10 minutes before clicking. Only 3 words were inside. Evelyn, it's me. No explanation, no accusations, no anger. Just a presence, reappearing in her world like a ghost who had suddenly remembered it was once real. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught in her throat. The boys were napping. The house was silent. But inside her chest, everything was screaming. Caleb had found her, and nothing would ever be the same. A single message shatters years of peace. What do you think Evelyn's first response should be? A scream, an explanation, or a cold silence? The quiet truth. Evelyn didn't open the email again for 3 days. She read it once, those 3 simple words, and then let it sit in her inbox like a ticking clock. She went through her routine, dressing the boys, feeding them, going for walks. But something had cracked in the calm she had so carefully built. She couldn't stop wondering how he had found her, if he had seen the photo himself, or if someone else had sent it to him. And most of all, she wondered why. After all this time, he was reaching out now. On the 3rd night, after the boys were asleep, Evelyn sat in the dark at her kitchen table. The lamp above flickered softly as the cursor blinked on a blank reply screen. She didn't know what she wanted to say. A part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw every painful memory at him in jagged shards. Another part of her wanted to delete the email and pretend it never came. But the part she couldn't ignore was the one that whispered the truth. He had a right to know, not to claim, not to erase the past, but to know. Her reply was brief. I don't know why you're writing, but they exist. They're beautiful, and they're mine. I don't need anything from you. I just need you to understand you gave them nothing until now. She didn't expect a response. She sent it and closed the laptop as if closing it could seal off the part of her heart that had just cracked open again. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words. But Caleb did reply. The next day, I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to see them, or you. I've made mistakes, but please let me at least explain what happened." Evelyn stared at the screen for a long time. She remembered his voice, his laugh, the way he used to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when she was being too stubborn to cry. She also remembered the betrayal, the other woman, the unanswered calls, the silence that followed. And now, here he was, asking for a conversation he should have fought for years ago. She didn't reply that day, but the next week she told him to come to Harbor Cove if he was serious. She gave no address, no promises, just a place and a time, the park near the water. Friday at noon. She didn't know if he would come. She didn't know if she really wanted him to. Friday arrived with a sky half full of clouds and an ocean wind that carried the smell of salt and kelp. Evelyn wore a sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a low braid. She left the boys at home with a sitter. This moment, this confrontation, wasn't for them. Not yet. When she saw him walking down the path, something in her chest twisted. Caleb looked older, not aged in a bad way, but changed. His face was sharper, his eyes more sunken, as if time had worn down the perfect exterior he had always maintained. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark jeans and a jacket. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were slightly hunched. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment far longer than she had. "Hello," he said when he reached her, his voice low, as if he was trying not to break the fragile air between them. Evelyn didn't speak at first. She studied him, unsure if she was looking at the man who had once made her feel invincible, or the man who had let her disappear without a fight. "I saw the photo," he said. "They're just boys," she replied. "They're your sons." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of those words was pressing down on him like gravity. "I didn't know. Evelyn, I swear, if I had known—" "If you had known," she cut him off. Her voice rose. "What? You would have stayed? You would have fought? Because the man I saw with another woman that night didn't look confused, Caleb. He looked happy. He looked stunned. That woman was my sister. I didn't have a chance to tell you. I didn't want her addiction to be all over the media, so I kept it private. I was going to propose to you that week. The ring was already in my pocket when you left." Evelyn felt her stomach drop. The words hit her like cold water, and for a second she forgot how to breathe. "No, don't say that. It's the truth," he said. "But I didn't chase you. That's on me. I thought you left because you didn't want the life I was building. I thought, maybe you never really wanted to stay." She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Not because she believed him immediately, but because a part of her had always feared there was more to the story. And now here it was, spilling out in the cold wind of a place she had once considered safe. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back?" Caleb took a step closer, but not too close. "Because I saw them. Because I realized I lost the most important thing I had, and I didn't even know it. And because I don't want them to grow up thinking their father never cared. I can't erase what I did, but I can show up now, if you'll let me." The wind whispered through the trees, and Evelyn stood still, her heart split between the past and the present. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to believe. But she knew the boys would one day ask who their father was. And when that day came, she wanted to be able to tell them that he at least tried. "I don't promise anything," she said. "But maybe, just maybe, you can meet them. One step at a time." Caleb nodded, his eyes wet but steady. One step at a time, and for the first time in years, something that had been broken began, slowly, to mend. Not with forgiveness, not yet, but with the truth. And that was a start. After hearing the truth, do you think Evelyn should have forgiven Caleb immediately? How does the one step at a time approach set up their future? A quiet partnership, Caleb waited 3 days before Evelyn agreed to let him meet the boys. She didn't tell Leo and Finn much. She didn't know how. How do you explain to 3-year-olds that a man they've never met was supposed to have stayed, but didn't? She told them a friend was coming to visit. She rehearsed answers in her head to the questions they might ask, but hoped they wouldn't. Her stomach was in a knot all day. She arranged the meeting at the local botanical garden, a space that was wide and open, where the boys could run free and she wouldn't feel trapped. She didn't want them to feel like they were being scrutinized, and she didn't want Caleb to think for a moment that this would be easy or casual. This was the most important moment of their lives so far, even if the boys didn't yet understand it. Caleb arrived early, dressed simply in a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, and he held a small toy truck in one hand and a storybook in the other. Evelyn wasn't sure if gifts were a good idea or not, but she was grateful he didn't come empty-handed. She stood back as he waited nervously near the entrance, checking his watch, looking around like a man trying not to panic. When the boys arrived with her, Leo immediately ran toward the flowers, shouting something about finding a butterfly. Finn, more cautious, clung to Evelyn's leg, watching Caleb with a quiet curiosity. Caleb didn't rush them. He knelt down and waited until they came close. He didn't speak right away. He just offered the truck to Leo and held out the book to Finn. Leo, true to form, took the truck without hesitation and started running it across the gravel. Finn stared at the book, then slowly walked forward and took it in his small hands. Caleb looked at Evelyn for permission. She gave him a small nod, and then he spoke. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm Caleb. I'm really happy to meet you." Leo didn't reply, too focused on making motor sounds, but Finn nodded once, serious and quiet, and said, "Hello." That was the start. They walked through the gardens together for over an hour. Caleb kept the boys' pace, not taking control, not pushing conversation. He asked what their favorite colors were, whether they liked dinosaurs or space more, what songs they liked to sing. Leo answered every question with delight, while Finn often waited. Then Ed added his own thoughts with a quiet wisdom. Evelyn watched it all unfold with a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. This was the man who had missed every birthday, every fever, every first word. And yet, he was here, present, listening. As they sat on a bench under a wisteria vine, Leo climbed up on the back and pretended to be a pirate. Caleb offered to read to Finn, who was already turning the pages of the book he had brought. Evelyn sat beside them, but didn't talk much. It wasn't needed. Her eyes never left the scene. A man who had once vanished, now softly reading to a child who didn't even know what a father was supposed to be. When it was time to go, Leo said, "You come into our house next time?" Evelyn's heart stopped for a moment, but Caleb looked at her before he answered. "That's up to your mom," he said, "but I'd like to." Finn looked up at him. "You know how to make pancakes?" Caleb laughed softly. "Not very well, but I can learn." That night, after the boys were asleep, Evelyn sat on her porch, a blanket around her legs, and stared out into the darkness. Caleb had walked them home, but he didn't stay. He thanked her. He said he wouldn't call unless she said it was okay. He left her without pressure, without promises, only with the feeling that something might finally be changing. She thought about how easy it would be to fall back into the past, to imagine him holding her the way he used to, whispering apologies and dreams they once shared. But she wasn't the woman he had left behind. She was stronger now. And she wasn't doing this for nostalgia. She was doing it for Leo and Finn, for the chance that they might get to know a version of their father who wasn't perfect, but was present. That, more than anything, was what they deserved. And if Caleb kept showing up, not with grand gestures, but with a quiet consistency. Maybe, just maybe, he could become someone worth forgiving, not for the past, but for the future they could still build. A new chapter. In the following weeks, Caleb began showing up every Saturday morning like clockwork. At first, Evelyn kept things cautious. She never left him alone with the boys. She always stayed close, watching with a quiet intensity. But slowly, as she watched his steady patience, his gentle attention, and the genuine effort in his eyes, she began to lower her guard, piece by piece. The boys, however, needed no convincing. Leo quickly attached himself to Caleb as if he'd always been there, dragging him into imaginary games, insisting he build Lego towers and chase them around the backyard as a dinosaur. Finn took longer. He would sit close, but rarely touch him, watching Caleb with silent eyes, as if waiting to see if this new person would also disappear. But even he began to warm up, especially when Caleb would read to them or sit cross-legged on the floor, drawing ridiculous stick figures at their command. Evelyn began to see a side of Caleb she had never known. He was softer now, stripped of the arrogance and the image he used to wear like armor. He didn't talk about his company unless he was asked. He never pulled out his phone when he was with the boys. He didn't ask for forgiveness or try to make grand declarations. He just showed up, week after week, on time, with his sleeves rolled up and an expression that said he knew how much he had to prove. One Saturday afternoon, as Caleb helped Evelyn wash the boys' paint-covered hands in the kitchen sink, Leo suddenly turned to him and said, "You can come on Wednesdays too, not just Saturdays." Evelyn froze, unsure how to respond, but Caleb just smiled and looked at her for permission. She gave him a small nod. Beginning that week, Wednesdays became their second ritual. He would bring takeout and play with the boys until bedtime, often helping Evelyn clean up afterward. They never talked much about the past. The unspoken agreement between them was clear. The past was heavy and rough, but the present had to be gentle enough to build trust. One night, as they were folding laundry together in the living room, Evelyn finally asked the question that had been on the edge of her heart for weeks. "What made you stop looking?" Caleb paused, his hands buried in a pile of tiny socks. "I didn't know how," he said softly. "After you left, I thought you didn't want to be found. I thought you hated me so much that disappearing was your way of telling me it was all over. And honestly, I didn't know if I deserved to find you." He looked at her then, his eyes filled with something that felt like regret, steeped in truth. "But I should have tried harder. I should have known you wouldn't have just left without a reason." Evelyn didn't reply right away. The boys' laughter echoed from their bedroom down the hall. She thought of the nights she had spent rocking them to sleep, of the birthdays she had planned alone, of the loneliness she had fought like an illness. "You missed so much," she whispered. "You missed everything." Caleb nodded slowly. "I know, and I'll never get that time back. But if you'll let me, I want to be here for everything that's to come." Their connection wasn't romantic again. Not yet. But something deeper was forming between them. A quiet partnership, rooted in co-parenting, in redemption, in the slow rebuilding of something that had once shattered. Evelyn saw how the boys flourished with him near. Leo became more secure. Finn began to open up, to smile more. They asked for him when he wasn't around. They drew pictures of their family, which now included 4 stick figures instead of 3. One night, after the boys were asleep, Evelyn walked into the living room and found Caleb asleep on the couch, his arms crossed, his head tipped back, a crayon still tucked behind his ear from story time. She didn't wake him. She sat across from him and just watched for a while, realizing that for the first time in years, the house felt full. Not noisy or chaotic, just full, complete in a way she hadn't allowed herself to believe was possible. She didn't know what the future would hold. She didn't know if she and Caleb would ever be what they once were. But she knew her sons were happier, that she no longer carried the weight alone, and that Caleb, for all his failures, was trying. Every single day. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come with a grand gesture. Sometimes, it tiptoes in through routine, through quiet apologies made with actions instead of words. And Evelyn was learning that maybe, just maybe, second chances didn't have to be loud to be real. The real happy ending by the time fall arrived in Harbor Cove, with crisp air and leave. Turning gold on the hills, Caleb had become a pillar in their lives. Not just on weekends or midweek dinners. He was there for school projects, doctor's appointments, bedtime stories, and early morning pancake requests. The boys now called him Death, without hesitation. They said it naturally, like breathing. Caleb never asked them to, never corrected them. But the first time Finn whispered, "Dad, come look," while building a block tower, Evelyn had seen Caleb freeze, just for a moment, as if the word had taken his breath away in the best possible way. Evelyn had watched it all unfold, slowly, cautiously, but steadily. She didn't want to fall into old patterns or be swept away by the comfort of the familiar. Too much had happened for that. But over time, the weight of what she had carried alone for so long began to ease. She no longer felt the constant ache of resentment. In its place, something softer grew. Acceptance, understanding, perhaps even the first stages of forgiveness. Not because Caleb had asked for it, but because he had earned it. Every night, every morning of taking them to school, every quiet moment where he chose presence over pride, stitched a new version of him that she could begin to trust. Then, one snowy December afternoon, as the first real snowfall blanketed the town, and the boys danced barefoot in the living room to Christmas music, Caleb asked Evelyn if they could talk alone. They stood by the window as the twins spun in circles on the rug, oblivious to anything outside their joy. Caleb pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath caught, but when he opened it, it wasn't a ring. Inside was a simple silver chain with two small engraved pendants, Leo and Finn. He held it out to her. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said, his voice steady but soft. "Not yet. I just wanted to give you something to say thank you. For them, for the chance to be their father, and for not closing the door completely, even when you had every right to." Evelyn looked at the necklace. Her fingers trembled slightly. She didn't say anything at first. She just took it. Gently. That moment didn't need romance or declarations. It needed the truth, and she already had it. By spring, the little cottage began to feel smaller. The boys were growing fast. Evelyn and Caleb began to look, quietly together, for something more permanent. A house with a backyard and more light. Not a mansion. Not a statement. Just a home. They found one on the outskirts of town. It needed work. The kitchen tiles were cracked, but the yard bloomed with wildflowers, and the view looked out over a gentle hill. It felt right, like a place where new stories could be written. Moving day was chaotic, with the boys running between boxes, arguing about which room would get the space-themed wallpaper. Caleb spent the day lifting furniture and letting Leo direct where everything should go, while Evelyn unpacked the kitchen and tried not to cry every time she opened a drawer and saw how far they had come. That night, after the boys were asleep in their new beds, Evelyn and Caleb sat on the back porch under a string of temporary lights. There were still boxes everywhere, tools scattered across the deck. But it didn't matter. The air was warm. The silence was peaceful. Evelyn turned to him and said, without needing to plan it, "I think I'm ready." Caleb looked at her, unsure if she meant for the house, for life, or for something more. "Ready for what?" he asked softly. She smiled, not in the cautious way, but something real, full of light. "To stop pretending I'm not still in love with you." He didn't say anything at first. He just took her hand and kissed her fingers. Then he said, "I never stopped being in love with you." They didn't rush it. They didn't announce anything. But from that night on, they lived not just as co-parents, not just as two people healing separately, but as a family. A real one. Messy and human and whole. And years later, when Leo and Finn stood on their high school graduation stage and thanked their mom and dad for being their best team, Evelyn and Caleb sat in the front row, side by side, their hands intertwined. Not because everything had been perfect, but because they had chosen, again and again, not to give up. On each other, on their kids, and on love. And that choice made all the difference.